In the Netherlands, when Corona crisis hit or the measures hit, there was this protest group that sprung out of that called Virus Truth, and they were taking the Dutch government to court for the measures. So I found that interesting. So I was in court, I was audience, I was seeing how that evolved, and I was at demonstrations. And at one of those events, I met a Dutch lawyer, Charlie de Vreede. And I have interviewed her here for some activism stuff that she does. And we were talking about Assange, and I said, well, I was in London in February. I've been following that thing over the last years. And she said, yeah, so did I. So we decided to make an interview of her as a Dutch law professional observing what's going on with Julian Assange in London currently. So if people want to read up on my interviews, we have talked. So the first conversation that we did today was Christian Rufnison of WikiLeaks. He referred to Nils Melzer, who is the rapporteur for torture by the United Nations. I have interviewed Nils Melzer. And Rufnison is a journalist. Another journalist that's involved with Julian Assange's case is Stefania Maurizi. She's an Italian journalist, and she is the one that's been working year after year in getting FOIA information through Freedom of Information Act out in the Assange case. So she's doing FOIA requests to United States, to United Kingdom, to Sweden, to I don't know what other countries. And she's managed to figure out that the Crown Prosecution Service, so the British prosecutors have actually instructed Sweden in things, and that in Great Britain they got rid of evidence. So that's journalistic work right there. So we're bitching about mainstream journalists not doing effort. Well, there is good journalists out there, and Stefania is one of them. I have talked to Stefania Maurizi also. That's why I'm bringing this up. So if you want to watch the Nils Melzer interview, Stefania Maurizi interview, look them up. They're on the Potkaars channel, and they're in English. Sorry, Dutch viewers. So what do you think? Ravoci, we talked to Charlie de Vreede yesterday. We did it together. Let's watch it again, shall we? Here we go. So time now to turn to Charlie de Vreede, which is my fellow country person. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, how you doing?
So I am. You're a legal professional here in the Netherlands, and just like Ravoci and myself, you've been following the Julian Assange case up closely.
Definitely.
And even more so the extradition trial that was a month ago. So let's discuss what went on with the extradition trial of Assange in London last month, and how that, if at all, that ties into Trump or Biden being elected. Just before we start, maybe to get to know you, have you picked a candidate? If you were allowed to vote, who would you vote for?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, 100% vote for Trump, without a shadow of a doubt. Not because of Trump. I mean, I don't think he's super. I don't know. Like, I don't care about the person. I don't do identity politics, but he's anti-establishment. So that's to me, that's really really positive. And there's really it's not a left or right issue at all. It's like you've got nationalism versus internationalism. You've got more government, more rules and regulations, as opposed to being a bit more free, I guess. That's how I see it.
You have voted already, or haven't you?
No, I didn't, because it's a long process being abroad. You have to physically mail in a request to my state, and then they have to send it back, and then you have to send it back again. And I just, the last person I consciously felt comfortable voting for was Ron Paul, back in the day. And I agree with what Charlie said about President Trump. But yeah, I think that we're at a point where things are just so many big things are happening that regardless of who wins, there are like things that are coming that no one can stop. So
don't you think it's going to be accelerated if Joe Biden wins?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. So,
yeah, of course, yeah.
So I was just mentioning before we started recording, I saw the Rubin report yesterday, and he actually he voted for Trump, he said, and he's been well, he has some negative reactions in his personal life, but he said he went into vote and he didn't even have to show an ID. So I think that's voter fraud already, and we haven't even officially started voting yet. Like tomorrow is the vote, but if you don't have to show your identification to vote, that's insane. So he lives in California, which is that's a very, very democratic state, and they also have this regulations. There's other rules that they can vote on, and this Rule 16, I think, it's basically on positive discrimination, which is definitely also discrimination, which is against the law. Just trying to vote, so sort of social justice warrior rights for people to be judged on the basis of their race or their sexual orientation.
Let's move into the topic of this conversation.
Yeah.
So, in September there was this long lawsuit, is that what you would call it, in London, where they'd have to decide if Julian Assange is going to be extradited to the United States or not.
It's an extradition hearing.
Yeah, extradition hearing. So how does that work then? Are you? I mean, I've seen him being held in a very high security prison with no liberties at all, basically solitary confinement. How does that work if a country wants you extradited? I mean, you're not criminally indicted.
I think they say he's a potential flight risk. But yeah, no, you're supposed to take care of a person who's I mean they're not gonna grant him bail. I mean he did flee his like the previous time, so to speak. So there's maybe something to say about that. But
you think you're referring to him getting a political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy? So international treaties would not describe that as fleeing, I believe.
No, he jumped bail.
Well, okay, fair enough. Okay, well, he's done his time for that, I think, by now.
He's done his time for that, yeah. Exactly, that's why we had to wait. But
let's okay, first question that I would have is, what would be grounds for extradition? Are there grounds in what Assange did that he'd be extradited to the United States? And Wojciech, kick in also, whatever, with you or not. Yeah. Charlie.
I say absolutely no, but I mean, if you follow, this is conspiracy, conspiring against the government. If you follow the narrative by the U.S. government, then you should say, yeah, there's grounds for that. But if you're talking about making public these confidential information about war crimes, you're allowed to do that under international law. So it's for the greater good. It's for a public interest. You're allowed to do that. So then I would say no, there's no grounds, and it's political colored. Like, so then there would on the basis of that, there's the Article 4 of the US-UK extradition treaty. You're not allowed to if they seek extradition for a political offense, then you're not allowed to extradite. So. And then I would say absolutely not. But if you follow the U.S. government, what they say, then.
I'm just reminded of the last conversation I had with Rico for my podcast, and what Rico explained was that the court in the UK, that they had nothing really against Assange, and that it was essentially like a kangaroo court, and just as you say, Charlie, that in reality, like, there was nothing that they really had on him. But as you said, it's when you're caught up in the empire's web, they can have their way with you, right?
Yeah, they made in this US-UK extradition treaty, you don't actually have to have a basic level of evidence. So it's a very weak extradition treaty. They made this on purpose this way, so everyone could be extradited to the US. So it's not normal. That's not a normal provision in an extradition treaty. Normally, you would have to have some sort of proof, which sounds so logical, right?
But then the chances are that he'd be extradited then. I mean, if they don't have to prove it.
No, it's going to be a very lengthy process. I mean, we're just in the beginning now, because you have so we have this hearing now, and we're expecting to have the judge ruling on the 4th of January of 2021, and then there's going to be an appeal. I mean, if I know the Assange's defense will appeal if they lose, but I'm guessing the United States government will appeal as well if they lose. So then you go to the High Court, to the Court of Appeals, and then you can eventually even go to the Supreme Court. So we're not done yet. But yeah, there's a chance that he would be extradited, of course, and then, which would also be illegal because he would be subjected to torture if he would be going to the United States, because then he's going to go to a high security prison. He's going to be in solitary confinement. So that would be another grounds not to extradite, because you can't extradite someone to another country if there's a realistic threat that they would be subjected to torture.
All right. So Charlie and myself have discussed this in Dutch in a separate interview, and one of the things that we concluded is that there was no media attention at all in the Netherlands for that last month of trial, and hardly any for the week in February. Ravoji, how is the Assange extradition shown, or to the American? Nothing.
Well, I mean, let's say in the Mexican press, I mean, because I'm down here, I'm following some of it in Spanish. It's very not much at all, and I would say the same in the U.S. And kind of just to comment what you were saying about the chances of Assange. I don't know if you followed Peter Hitchens, right? Or he recently published a piece, Peter Hitchens, about what the British judge Lord Sumption recently just said, that democracy is dead in Britain, and that
100%.
But he's not understating this. Like literally, that it's become a totalitarian state for good, and democracy is gone. And what has happened now is something that hasn't happened in centuries. And this is serious for all of us, because democracy is dead. Democracy
and the rule of law, 100%. And human rights. So this is like in the European Union, you have the 3 pillars of the European Union, which is democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. It's gone. It's in shambles, 100%. And it's terrible because I specialize in human rights law, and it's horrible.
You being an American, Ravoji, I mean, that's how.
That's why I went to Kazakhstan, which doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S.
All right, so let's walk by what happened in court. What was the alleged crime that the United States wants him for, and what was the prosecution side of it, and how did defense react to that, Charlie?
Okay, so let me just quickly read out the counts of the indictment. So you have conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defense information. That was count 1. You have count 2, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. Count 3, obtaining national defense information. Counts 5 to 8, obtaining national defense information. Count 9, disclosure of national defense information. Count 12 to 14, disclosure of national defense information. And same for counts 15 to 17. That's it.
There was a situation with the original indictment, and then that thing was added upon or changed with the superseding indictment. How did that work?
Yeah, so the first indictment that was based on the Computer Intrusion Act, and so that's a conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, and that's completely different, because now they're looking at the Espionage Act. And the Espionage Act is set by the United States to have universal jurisdiction. I don't think that's the same for the Computer Intrusion Act. I wouldn't imagine so. So yeah, they changed the indictment. So you have a defense team working for a client. They build a whole case, and I would say they would probably have a lot on the jurisdiction part, and then they just changed the indictment prior to the case with only a very short notice. So then that throws off the entire strategy. And then what we talked about in the previous conversation, that also there was where he was staying at the Ecuadorian what do you say?
Embassy, yeah.
Embassy. That was bugged. Like, there was surveillance. There were cameras and there were microphones, even in the toilet. So they listened in to the conversations that Assange had with his defense, with his lawyers. So already they know the whole strategy. This is not normally, this would throw out a case immediately, because that's highly illegal. And they've also confiscated classified or confidential information between Assange and his legal team. That's also highly illegal. Should throw out a case immediately as well. But
all right. So
very strange things happening here.
yeah, and another thing is being a court proceedings being public. I mean, in the Netherlands, it's supposed to be publicly accessible to the audience. You're supposed to see the rule of law as a citizen. However, yeah, we're in a corona crisis globally, so people weren't allowed in the court, and even journalists and international observers weren't allowed in the court. So, was this? Are we supposed to take this trial seriously, or?
I mean, it is very serious, but I mean, it's not a fair trial, not in the slightest. You know, the judge, like there's this so we got a new judge. She brought in a laptop with her, and so you have these procedural sort of things, so that she rules on during the trial. So then you have both sides, they're arguing, and then when she ruled on these things, she would open her laptop and read out the previously written statement. So you can't. I don't think you can take that too seriously. But
yeah, so the verdict is set already, basically.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, it doesn't really.
Now the question being, so this is an election night, right? The United States is picking either Biden or Trump, or probably not picking either, and fighting over that for the coming weeks or months, maybe. But would either candidate respond differently? Is Assange extradited? You think?
Well, I think, like we just said, I think if Joe Biden is elected, then that there is the whole the political establishment that you will vote for, and Trump is anti-establishment, and so what I think the only chance that Assange has for a presidential pardon would be Trump giving him a pardon. And I think that's to be expected from Joe Biden or Kamala Harris.
Would you agree, Roger?
Yeah, but I feel with Biden, Assange is dead for sure. Yeah. But with Trump, that there's a small chance that he would pardon. I don't think because again, it's like, I feel like it's the John F. Kennedy deep state situation where, when Kennedy turned, they killed him and his brother and Martin Luther King Jr. And there's always, they can always tie the hands of Trump. So I don't think, even if he could, even if he wanted to, doesn't mean that he could, but definitely that there would be a chance that Trump could do it, but I don't think it would be a given.
I have my hopes on that, for sure. You can do it, Mr. President. We have faith in you.
Yeah, one can hope. But the point that I made to you, Charlie, is that under the Trump administration, and I say this to everybody that favors Trump, under his administration, a reality winner was arrested and tried for Espionage Act. She's a whistleblower, and now maybe a president can't do that much, but he hasn't gone out of his way to help her.
No, but he has to be re-elected, so you have to take that into account. And once the election is over, then he has some freedom to do that, because he doesn't have to get re-elected after that. So And with Assange, he could not burn his fingers on that prior to the elections, because with Assange, you have the Russian collusion thing going. If he would have said anything about Assange, because remember, in the 2016 election, he said, "I love WikiLeaks, love, 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 love." He said it many times. And then and after that, he said, "Assange, oh, I don't know anything about that." I mean, he's not an idiot. He's a very smart, very intelligent man. So, of course, he knows about it, but he can't comment on it. He can after the election is done, and he can't. Then he will have the freedom to open up about it.
That's exactly what happened with Kennedy when he was finished going through his first term. He had hinted he was going to pull out of Vietnam, but only when he got elected the second time. So he wasn't, talking about that during his first term. Oh. And of course, they killed him.
Suicide.
They killed him before he could do that. So,
yeah.
Charlie made the point that it would be political suicide if you would push that agenda in your first term. So that's
100%.
That's why you have your hopes.
With Reality Winner, I don't know. It's so interconnected. So then, yeah, I mean, if he would have said anything about Reality Winner, then the narrative would have been, oh, so he's going to pardon Reality Winner, then he's going to pardon Assange as well, and then he's a Russian spy, whatever, So you can't. You have to wait until the election is over.
Okay, just for the American audience and international audience that haven't been following the Assange trial, maybe emphasize, and maybe you can do this, Charlie, and we can add whatever. How has he been treated by the United Kingdom? And is that a common approach to a person being extradited?
No, it's insane how he's been treated. I mean, at first it started at the Ecuadorian embassy. In the first few years, he was treated very, very well there. And then you have a new president coming in in Ecuador. So you also have a new ambassador going into the embassy. And then after that, that's when it really started going south. And then he was allowed less and less visitors, and then we had the whole surveillance thing where everything was bugged. And after a while, it's just they took away his phone privileges, they took away his internet, took away his razor. We all saw him when he got out, when he was dragged out of the embassy. You saw him with the long beard. Just yesterday, I was watching these, like Trevor Noah and Stephen Colbert joking about it, joking about a man who's been subjected to torture. It's terrible. Everyone laughing about it. It was just, I couldn't believe it. They were commenting on his personal hygiene. And I'm thinking, how do people not see? He's stuck in this embassy. He's completely reliant on what they give him. So it's not his fault. That he has a long beard, for instance. And then, I mean, everyone heard the stories about he was smearing poop on the walls. Well, then that's just a lie, because they've located the cleaning company that cleaned the embassy, and they've completely debunked this. But you don't hear that in mainstream media, because they want to have a character assassination, basically. So. And it's been very effective. I mean, in the States, I'd say 95% of Americans hate him. That's not a real. I've just made that up, but a lot of people hate him in the States. They see him as an enemy of the state. So.
Would you agree, Voci? What's your assessment on the American audience?
I haven't been to the States for a while, and so I can't really pick that up on my radar. I think maybe 95%, maybe a little too high, but I probably agree with you that a majority, they just believe whatever the mainstream says. I mean, that's the feeling I have with Americans in general, that most believe the mainstream narrative.
The narrative, yeah. And it's the same, you have Niels Meltzer, who is the UN ambassador on torture. And he said, because he investigated this situation, and he said, I just saw this amazing speech by him. We'll put a link below so people can watch that, because he described it perfectly. He said he didn't know much about the case. And then it was dropped on his desk, so to say, and then he was like, "Oh God, I have to help this person who raped those women in Sweden, and it's disgusting, horrible. I have to. Well, I mean, of course he's going to look into it. That's his job, and he's an honest man. So he looked into it, and then he's completely changed his mind on this, and because he knows now, he sees now that it's all been lies, and the public has been fed this horrible story. And so yeah, please, we'll put the link down below. Please look at that speech that he held, because he's actively fighting to get Assange out, because he assessed the situation and he said this is 100% certainly torture, psychological torture, and he's not done this on his own. There's been other professionals looking into this, like doctors assessing his health, and they say there's a real risk here that Assange might not survive this if they keep going on with this in this situation. So,
okay, to recap on that bit, so in the United Nations, all countries, including United States, including Great Britain, have agreed to not torture, and then that treaty, if you will, gets a rapporteur assigned. That's Nils Melzer currently, so he's the rapporteur for torture, and he goes investigate if there's a possible case of torture, and he did that, and he assessed the health condition and of Assange, and there's protocols for that. So he did that with doctors and psychiatrists, and he ran through that and professionally assessed, well, this is he shows all symptoms of torture, and that was done by Great Britain, right, by United Kingdom, working together, you could say, with the United States. I mean, we have Italian journalist Stefania Morici, who did through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, research on how does that work with United States, Great Britain, Sweden, even that alleged rape situation, and these things are tied together. Okay.
So, but under the Convention Against Torture, there is a legal obligation to prosecute every act of torture. A legal obligation to prosecute.
Well, I interviewed Mr. Meltzer in 2019, and I asked him the same question. So what happens when you find a victim of torture? And he says, well, it's within my mandate to write a letter. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. To write a letter. So he addresses the signing countries.
And then they have a legal obligation to investigate and prosecute.
Oh yeah, or either that, or they would not respond, or they would respond, we're of a different opinion.
Yes, well, that's what happened, but this is not. I mean, I studied international law, so from an international law perspective, something should happen.
Yeah, so it's not just the rule of law in the United Kingdom that is compromised. It might be international law also. That's what you're saying.
Yes, this Convention Against Torture.
All right.
Which, I mean, torture is one of those, like Jus Cogens, is one of those very, very strict laws that the entire international community is in agreement on, that we should do everything to abolish torture, and that every act of torture will be investigated and prosecuted and ended as soon as possible. And I mean, not extradite someone against against an extradition treaty, and that they would be subjected to torture in the United States as well. I mean, he's subject to torture now. He's in solitary confinement, and I mean, also the conditions in the trial, we didn't talk about that in the previous conversation, but he was held in this like glass box. Basically, he was not able to communicate with his legal team, and they're not able to read all the files. It's wrong. It's wrong on every single level. It's insane that this is happening.
All right. Well, any final questions from you, or what your final things you want?
I would just add, I hate to always be the party pooper, but like what Peter Hitchens and Lord Sumption were saying, that democracy is dead, and just to add on what you were saying, I recently interviewed Doug Valentine, who wrote about CIA's Phoenix program that exterminated tens of thousands of people in Vietnam, and how that has come back to the U.S. like as a police state. And near where I grew up in Chicago, they have black sites where they illegally they don't arrest people. They just rendition them to this black site in the middle of Chicago. They've tortured people there and killed them. So this is ongoing. The war on terror has stripped the veneer off of democracy. And recently it was reported in Mexico that the former president Calderon, who's basically, U.S. puppet, that the president of Mexico, he personally had been running these death squads, torture.
The former president.
That's former President Calderon, Felipe Calderon, who's teaching at Harvard now or whatever. So this shows you that when you talk about rule of law and torture, I mean, here we are, they're running, the president of Mexico is running torture rendition in Mexico, back with the U.S. They're doing it in the U.S. So Well, the gloves, I think the mask is coming off and the gloves are coming off.
Oh, we all have to wear masks, but yeah.
Well, for them, the mask is coming off.
Yeah, they don't have to abide by the rules. Of course not. No. So I just want to comment on the trial a little bit more, because what was stated by the United States is that there was a real risk that people would get hurt because of these leaks. I mean, we're talking about leaks that happened 10 years ago, and no harm has been done at all. The only thing that was done was they revealed how much harm that was done. War crimes, absolutely 100% certain war crimes on a massive scale, that was revealed. But no harm was done to American citizens or due to these documents coming out. So, and that also that was stated that he just recklessly shared these documents and he didn't change any of the names, or there was a very, very meticulous redaction process before these documents were published by WikiLeaks. So I think, don't take my word for it, investigate yourself, but don't the things that people are convinced are true, it's a mainstream media narrative, and that is just not true. And this has been there's been statements in the trial now that people are coming forward saying about this meticulous redaction process. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, there was no absolutely no forensic evidence in this case. There's no evidence against Assange, because we're talking about these files. They were leaked by Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning, and he was talking back then. He was talking to a person called Nathaniel Frank, not Julian Assange. There's no forensic evidence tying Julian Assange to these acts. I mean, it's clear that WikiLeaks has published these documents, but you can't tie Julian Assange to this. You need forensic evidence for that, and we have no forensic evidence. Sorry.
Charlie de Vreede, my fellow country person from the Netherlands, thank you so much for this.
I used to live in Australia. You know, he's my fellow Aussie. So, fellow Aussie.
Fellow Aussie. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
Australia is doing nothing for him at all. So, but
that's too harsh a statement. So the country maybe.
There's
massive support for Assange.
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, massive. Okay. There's so many great. I wasn't talking about that. I'm talking about government.
Thank you for this interview. Take care.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make.
You think I'm joking? Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.